Yes, I'm finally driving the BMW XM. I am kind of late to the show, to the party, but it is what it is. This is the first time I'm driving the BMW XM, and it has been a wholesome experience, a teachable moment for me, because I have to admit that before driving this car, I saw other YouTubers do it, and I saw a lot of criticism towards this car. And I somehow, since I kind of resonate with those guys, I somehow started to hate it myself without actually driving it, which is not okay, especially since I'm a journalist and I've been doing this for a long time. But this goes to show just how people can be influenced by certain opinion makers. And I really don't understand why some people hate on this car. It's not nearly as bad as you would think, and I actually think it's a bargain for the price BMW asks for it. Let's start off with what the XM is. Well, when BMW announced that the M division is working on a bespoke car, everybody online went berserk. That's because everybody online thought about the last car BMW M did that had no background in any production model whatsoever. I'm talking about the BMW M1, of course. That was a bespoke halo car created solely so that BMW M can show just what they can do with an adequate amount of money and time and expertise. So everybody thought about a car that would somehow resemble the M1, at least in spirit. Nobody thought about an SUV. However, this is what we got. And to say that we were surprised would be a drastic understatement. This is what they came up with. Why they decided to do an SUV? Well, I think it's easy to see, because if you look at the landscape in the automotive business right now, you'll understand that car makers are banking it all on SUVs. Everybody wants SUVs. So whereas we were thinking that maybe the Halo BMW M car will be a small coupe of some sorts, BMW actually did something else. They created an SUV because they knew this was needed in order to make this car a success. Now this is basically a BMW X5M under the sheet metal, coupled with a different drivetrain, different to some extent. This is also the CLAR platform underneath it all, but it has a longer wheelbase compared to the BMW X5. It's a wider and longer car, but it's also a lower car. And it's basically, when I first heard about this Project Rockstar, as BMW internal engineers called it, I heard about it being called the BMW X8. That's the original name that was going to be used for this car. Because in all ways relevant, this is basically a coupe version of the BMW X7. Because it's bigger than the X6, smaller than the X7, and it fits right in between. Why they changed the name from the X8 to XM remains a mystery to me right now. I'm guessing because they decided to go all out in terms of performance, not luxury. Even though this is the most luxurious BMW you can buy right now. And I'm guessing it's also because the M brand still has a lot of power, the most powerful letter in the world, and it would help sell this car to a bigger number of customers. I don't know. The point is, they created this car. And in terms of exterior design, you cannot say it resembles anything in BMW's range and anything on the road, period. It is a unique looking car, it's a special looking car, and it's a futuristic looking car. Whenever you see it in traffic, it feels like it was teleported there from the future. It feels like it's part of, I don't know, the cyberpunk games we've seen recently. It seems like it's a sort of digital rendering that came to life. It attracts so many views in traffic, so much attention, and it truly is a rock star. It looks absolutely amazing in my book. Yes, the front end does have huge grills, but they look good. They have a shape that's beautiful. They have a shape that reminds me of older BMWs. It's not the same story as it is in the case of the BMW 7 Series or the i7. Yes, it does have split headlights, but you only see them at night, and even then they look good. During the day, you only have the daytime running light, the strip on top of the bumper, and that looks good. Together with the illuminated grills, it looks absolutely fantastic. The rear end, well, it's not exactly fantastic in my book. I like it, but not a lot. But it's still beautiful and different. You have a huge tailgate. You have two BMW logos at the top of the tailgate that resemble the ones used on the BMW M1. That's a throwback to the M1. You have the XM logo in gold. You have thin, very thin bezel taillights with a strong 3D effect. It just looks good. The only thing I don't like about the rear end is the tailpipe situation. They have been stacked 2x2 on each side. I would have preferred them side by side in a more classic way. But either way, the car looks good. It has 23-inch golden wheels. And I know it sounds crazy to have 23-inch gold wheels, but somehow it works with the gold arch on the sides of the car. Somehow it works. You don't have to get the 23-inch wheels, by the way. You can have 21-inch wheels that come as standard, but these look so much better. They complete the package. And then you hop inside and you have all this luxury, and it looks really good. It's a very nice combination of merino leather. By the way, BMW calls this vintage leather. The one you see on the top of the dashboard and the top of the door cards feels brilliant to the touch. It has such a rich texture, and even though it has some blemishes like old leather would do, I absolutely love it. It feels different. It feels well built. If you want standard, good-looking leather, you have plenty of it in this interior. Also merino leather on the seats and everywhere. And leather has been used on the door cards, the interior of the door cards, and everywhere. So in terms of build quality, fit and finish, it is absolutely superb. You have Alcantara on the roof liner, the A pillar, the B pillar, everywhere, and on top of that, you have a special roof liner that has geometric shapes and lights on the sides, LED lighting on the sides, and looks absolutely brilliant, especially at night. You can change the colors. Whenever you're going through race mode, it turns red. When you start the car, it does a light show with the M colors and so on. So it's pretty awesome. So I love this interior, but I'm not crazy about some of the things they reused. Now, I told you this is based on the BMW X5M, but since this is a bespoke car, I don't have an issue with using the same engine or the same suspension, but some elements inside the car could have been different. This steering wheel, for example, doesn't feel special enough for a car that has been developed by the M division. I would have expected a different steering wheel. This is just the regular steering wheel you can get in the M2 as well. The gear shift lever, the same. I don't mind them, don't get me wrong. They're perfectly fine and they're easy to use and so on. They feel good to the touch, but they don't feel special enough for a car like this. So I would have changed these two elements and made this interior a lot more special, as BMW wants you to believe this car is very special. Well, change the steering wheel because everybody will interact with it. You can cut corners in other places and change the gear shift lever. Other than that, the materials inside are just leather, Alcantara, metal for the Bowers & Wilkins sound system grille covers, carbon fiber, glass, everything you could possibly think of. The infotainment system is the same you will find in any BMW M model. I won't go into it anymore. It works great, looks great, perfect. But I will mention the fact that unlike on other BMW cars that have the same overall screen. In this car, they actually did an effort to make it look like this has been thought of when the design was put together. What I mean by that is, if you look at the BMW iX, for example, and you see how the screen is simply put on top of the dashboard, it doesn't feel cohesive. That design doesn't feel cohesive, doesn't feel like it was planned. It seems like a last-minute improvisation. In this car, you have all those elements in the back that make it feel like this screen was created specifically for this car with this dashboard design in mind. And I actually like this. Now, if you're going to sit in the back, the extra wheelbase will turn into a lot of extra room. People of my size, 6 feet tall and 250 pounds, would have no issues sitting in the back. That area being called the lounge by BMW. And you have two very cozy pillows in the back over there, very good materials, the same quality as in the front, and plenty of room for extended trips. Now, the one thing I would have preferred in the back would be adjustable seats, right? So I would have loved to be able to adjust the seat back or the seat itself front and backwards. But I guess that would have clashed with the idea that this car is a sports car. But let's talk about what you just heard, which is the V8 engine under the hood. What's the drivetrain like? Well, this is the drivetrain we will see in the next BMW M5. And it uses the S68 engine under the hood, which is a 4.4 liter twin turbo V8, good for, in this case, 489 horsepower, coupled with an electric motor that's been sandwiched between the internal combustion engine and the gearbox. That electric motor can do 200 horsepower, and in total the car can rely on 653 horsepower and 800 Newton meters of torque. The transmission is the 8-speed ZF gearbox, we all know, and we have the MX Drive all-wheel drive system at our disposal to put the power down as efficiently as possible. We have a locking rear differential, of course, and we have integral steering, which is a first for a full-on BMW M car, and it goes hard. Let's take a look. Yeah, it goes like stink. According to BMW, the car will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.3 seconds, despite its 2.8 ton weight. That makes it slower than the BMW X5M competition, which has a 0.4 second advantage, but it's still an incredibly fast car in a straight line. And the fact that you have an instant throttle response thanks to that electric motor makes it fit the best of both worlds into one package, because you have the instant throttle response an electric car would have, combined with the V8 sound of a big engine, internal combustion engine. And that, in my book, makes it worth the money. And I've driven it hard a couple of times, and I cannot believe how well this car drives. Despite its weight, it uses an active anti-roll bar system on 48 volts that's meant to keep the car in check in tight corners. After all, it does weigh 2.8 tons, but if you drive it in a sporty fashion, you wouldn't be able to tell. You really wouldn't be able to tell that this car is so heavy. And that's what impressed me the most. And now I know some reviewers have said that it doesn't drive like an M car. That's baloney in my book. It is incredible what the engineers managed to put together here. We have a 5-arm rear axle suspension, double wishbone at the front, and the car just manages to keep its composure brilliantly in almost every driving situation, especially at the edge. That's where it feels the best. You can oversteer easily with it. It doesn't understeer at all, and it is absolutely brilliant to drive at the edge. Now, the thing that other reviewers don't understand is that the average skill of the average customer for this car is nowhere near theirs. So most of the customers will never reach the limits of this car. They will never go so far as those pro reviewers did, because they don't have the skill to do it. It's so big and imposing and intimidating that you need a lot of skill and a big set of and a lot of courage to take this car to the absolute limit, which is not something I don't think 90% of the customers will ever be able to do. So those reviewers who say this car doesn't drive like an M car, they don't understand that for most people this is more performance they could ever handle. This is more performance they could ever need. And I actually appreciate what BMW managed to do here. Now, I would have liked a more comfortable setup. This car doesn't have air suspension, just like the BMW X5M doesn't, because the M division says that would take away from the feeling and the agility of the car. Okay, fine. But whenever you're not driving this car in Sport Plus mode and carving canyons with it, it is incredibly stiff over certain bumps. It's rigid. It's not exactly what I would call comfortable. Unless you're driving on silky smooth asphalt like I'm doing right now, whenever you hit a small pothole, especially those small repeated bumps in the road, will have this car jumping around a lot, which is explainable considering its weight and the fact that we have 23-inch wheels on it with this much tire left between the rim and the ground. That's understandable. But I would have traded off some of the driving feel for a more comfortable ride overall. And I think that's a trade-off they should have done, because this is also a luxury, comfortable car as much as it's a sporty SUV. So a mix should have been reached between them. What also impressed me was the fuel consumption. Now, as I said, this is a plug-in hybrid, so it has a 26 kilowatt hour usable battery, almost 26. And I managed to pull about 60 kilometers of range with a full battery charge, which is amazing. And around town after the battery got depleted, the first 100 kilometers covered, I had a fuel consumption of almost 8 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is amazing for a car this heavy and this powerful. Absolutely amazing. Overall, for the last 10,000 kilometers, the average fuel consumption of this car has been 16 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is exactly the same as the BMW X5M competition I had not too long ago. And I don't think that's a lot by any measure. Considering the performance and the size of the car, no issues whatsoever. Also, driving this car around town, not just in a sporty fashion on a couple of B roads, you're amazed at how much attention you're getting. Everybody's looking at you, everybody's curious about the car, and you'll also be amazed by how easy it is to drive it. Even though it's a huge tank, it's so much easier to drive it around town than you would expect. Parking it is easy thanks to the rear steering axle, and you will drive most of the time in hybrid or electric mode. So it's going to be either eerily quiet inside, or you're going to hear a V8 rumble in the background, but not in a disturbing fashion. Furthermore, I think the V8 in this car sounds better than the one in the BMW X5M. I don't know if they changed anything to it, but I think it sounds absolutely brilliant. All things considered, I think this is a brilliant car. I absolutely loved it, and I think it's going to be a huge success. I love its design, I love the way it drives. I'm not a big fan of the comfort, but I could get used to it. And I also said earlier that I don't think it's expensive at all, as some other reviewers have said. Now, just a few days ago, I tested the BMW X5M competition, and that car had a price tag of 172,000 euros, and it was similarly equipped to this one. They had basically the same options. I think the X5M didn't have ventilated seats, and this one does. So they are similarly equipped. This car costs 187,000 euros, so 15,000 euros more than the X5M. But I think it's worth every penny. It's just so much more special. It's just so much more, it's so much better built. It feels better inside. The materials have a better quality. The fit and finish is better. And you have the advantages of a plug-in hybrid setup. What advantages? Well, instant throttle response, thanks to that electric motor that has 450 Newton meters of torque from 1 RPM. So that's an advantage. Also the lower fuel consumption, I don't know, any sort of tax brackets you could get and so on. So for 15,000 euros, I would definitely make the effort and buy this car. As I said, it's so much special. The interior is much better. There's more room in it, especially in the back. And yeah, it might be slower to 100 kilometers an hour, but who cares? I mean, you could do an ECU chip for the internal combustion engine and go, I don't know, you could have 600 horsepower coming from that alone, plus 200 from the electric motor. You would reach 800 horsepower like that, which in the BMW X5M is not as easy to achieve. But you don't really need more power. Trust me when I say 653 horsepower are more than enough for anyone. So that said, this has been my review of the BMW XM. It's, in my book, a brilliant car, and I absolutely love it. It's mad in the way it was designed. I know it's madness to think of an SUV as a sporty car, but we've reached that stage in the development of our cars. SUVs can now be incredibly sporty. And yes, the purest M car you can still buy today is the M2. It's not the XM. No matter how much BMW says that this has been developed by the M division, whatever. The purest M car you can buy today is the M2. But this is not a bad car. This is not an expensive car. This is a car I would totally get if I was in the market for such an expensive SUV. You want to talk about rivals? Well, you're looking at the Bentley Bentayga. You're looking at the Lamborghini Urus. You're looking at the Aston Martin DBX. That's the kind of car that rivals with this one. And yet again, by comparison, this is considerably cheaper. And I would have no problem picking it over any other rival I just mentioned. No other car draws attention like this one and has the drivetrain that this car has. That said, thank you for watching, and until next time, don't forget to like, share, and of course, subscribe. Ciao.